It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
Planet Green Trees. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. The Planet Green Trees show is underway with your host, attorney Michael Komorn.
All righty.
We have launched.
Welcome, everybody. You'll listen to Planet Green Trees episode number 559. We're calling it Ammo Cans. Steve, shut the doors, please. And today's date is April the 21st, 2022. I'm your host, Michael Komorn of Komorn Law, PLLC. And we're about to embark on 2 hours of discussion, rational debate, and information regarding the events of the week and maybe beyond that, including cannabis and a whole slew of other topics. Let me discuss momentarily here the topics we intend on covering, and it's not always guaranteed that we'll get to, but then we can do that and introduce all the steamed entertainment surrounding here. Nevada police are exploiting marijuana Schedule 1 loopholes to make arrests despite the legalization. The ACLU has filed a lawsuit, kind of similar to what took place here in Michigan. We're going to talk about whether they completely copied our complaint or not, and whether or not that is likely to succeed there in Nevada. Michigan regulators halt a plan to allow hemp conversion, recently announced by the CRA, the Cannabis Regulatory
The Cray
Agency, that they are not, even though despite considering allowing hemp growers to possibly sell into the processing as a source for CBD products and the like, that's not going to happen. Number three, Michigan blocked sales of marijuana products worth millions, once again, without an explanation, although I do understand those have been released, but the without an explanation is still unexplained. And Cannabis MSO TerrAscend continues Michigan acquisition spree. It's happening a lot throughout Michigan as market is in flux and prices of cannabis are dropping significantly. Very difficult for mom and pop stores to stay open, and there's a lot of acquisition plays going on. All right, you're listening to Planet Green Trees. I want to remind everybody that on October the 8th, Cannajam 2 will be commencing in Ypsilanti, and we invite all to tune in and look into that. And as we may have mentioned in the past, we booked our guests, entertainment, Laith El-Assad and Echoes of Pink Floyd will be returning, and of course T-Money Green and Roadhouse, and a whole slew of others, and maybe more to be added.
Road work.
What'd I say?
Roadhouse.
Roadhouse would work. I'm sorry, T-Money. I'm sorry.
It's a Patrick Swayze movie.
Roundhouse.
Yeah.
All right, so those are some topics we're going to discuss. Who knows? We may not even get to all of them. Let's go around the room and introduce everyone. We have the Bunker Boys, Tommy, Justin, and Dirty Dan laying somewhere around here. Next to them, we have Jim Powers of Michigan Parents United for Compassion.
Yeah.
And please welcome Jim Powers.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody. It is good to be here on this lovely Thursday evening with all of you, and I'm looking forward to the show.
All right, Steve Miller has been kind enough to stay with us and joining us for his commentary. I think Steve, of course, is a critical asset here at Komorn Law, as well as having a plethora of library of songs and hits from the 70s. Please welcome Steve Miller.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. Missing and unexplained without a note. I see Amanda is not in the Zoom. We have Jeff Frazier join us from areas unknown and places that maybe will be identified. But my dear friend, he's a internationally renowned attorney, guitar player, and iguana lover. Always glad to have him on the show. And in law enthusiast.
Nothing great ever happens without enthusiasm, brother. It's always great to be here. Thank you.
All right. And, of course, I see he's masked a little bit. Now he seems to be without a mask and driving. The one who's responsible for a lot of the things that have happened. Please welcome Jamie Lowell.
right now. I'll be back in a few minutes in front of a computer. Got a Bubba tea.
Nice. Bubba tea.
Boba.
I appreciate your commitment to the show and fighting through the transportation side of this and being able to join us. I really do. Well, we got a lot to talk about here, and we can start anyway. I do want to mention a couple of things. Well, maybe we'll get to those in a second. But, all right, how about this Nevada police thing, Jeff? What do you think about it? I sent you that article, and the ACLU is getting involved. And for those that don't, let me put a little context on this. Right before the 2018 election, in anticipation of the legalization of marijuana, Jeff Frazier, myself, Cannabis Counsel, and on behalf of John Sinclair and a number of other plaintiffs, doctors, patients, caregivers, veterans, pharmacists, doctors, we filed a lawsuit alleging that the existing scheduling of cannabis as a Schedule I was irrational and needed to be removed. One of the irrationalities was that the pharmacy board, as the director, I think, of the pharmacy board, was also sitting on the board that decided whether or not the medical marijuana licenses, and the idea that it could be Schedule I and not controlled as a controlled substance, but just people that could invest and get a license and had no background, and that was the qualifications for handling a Schedule I, was irrational. And nevertheless, I don't think anyone said it was rational, but we had issues with the court identifying standing, which is oftentimes the way the court will punt an issue and not take it up by saying there's no direct harm or no identifiable case here that is a companion to this where there's someone in jeopardy of losing something immediately. These are perceived problems and something to that effect. Nevertheless, we know from the Hash Bash, which Jamie Lowell was in charge of and did a great job, Yusuf Rabi, who has gotten around to introducing legislation to unschedule cannabis. Jamie, I want to make sure that I'm saying that right. He wants to unschedule or remove it from the controlled substance, and that's some legislation that's pending right now in Michigan. Is that right?
Yeah, it takes it off Schedule I and the pharmaceutical grade thing that was made up, a few years ago, and Schedule both of those come off.
Both of those come off. Okay. So with that being said, we tried to take action in the court, and the threshold of being able to accomplish this is very difficult. Jeff, and now the ACLU is filing claims related to this, right? And because there is an answer for it, which is there's a the issue is that you got the three branches of government. The judiciary is not supposed to make law, right? They're supposed to interpret the law. And if there's an immediate direct harm that's irrational and unfounded and capricious and all of that, it then that the court may find that it is unconstitutional or find that it needs to be stricken for those reasons from the but what do you think? You got any thoughts on this Nevada case, Jeff Frazier?
Yes, absolutely. I'm thrilled we're off to a great start. You're right. It's precisely the issue that we've raised, and it's apparently getting some play. I mean, there needs to be lawsuits precisely like this against every state pharmacy board in the country. You're right. Is going to, maybe if we're right a million times, to listen to us. We reckon.
I mean, our lawsuit precipitated the legalization of marijuana, and the idea that even after legalization, forget that the law says that people that use this Schedule I drug shall not be arrested if you're over the age of 21 and you're allowed to possess. Forget that these permissive, call them rights, have been created in this law. You have the other side of that. It also creates a regulated industry that's tax and regulate and blah, 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 blah. And the state is bringing in or reporting, $150 million in sales every month. And, of course, it begs the question, how could something really be Schedule I if the state is taking in that much money on taxes. It doesn't make any sense.
Precisely. You can't license contraband, and that's what my takeaway from this case is that how can this be contraband? And the cops are saying it's still contraband. It's mere presence. Still the mere smell allows us to stop, search, seize, forfeit, and otherwise fuck with you. Then they don't want to turn it loose, and it's that way in every state. It's on everywhere where we've quote unquote legalized, like in Michigan or California. It's still a Schedule I controlled substance in Arizona and everywhere.
So the main point of this from the ACLU, they've announced that they're exploiting a loophole, even though the state's constitutionally recognized medical value of marijuana and voters approved adult use legalization at the ballot in 2016. It still remains Schedule I, and the police are still arresting people for that. And the lawsuit was filed in the state's 8th Judicial District Court in Clark County, Nevada. States that they're entitled to relief because regarding the misclassification of marijuana, cannabis, and cannabis derivatives of Schedule I substance, failure to properly classify marijuana will cause irreparable injury to petitioners because they must continue to expend its resources on preventing and or remedying such efforts. The petitioner is seeking injunctive relief and asking the court to prohibit the board from keeping cannabis in Schedule I. Meanwhile, Nevada's marijuana market is thriving, with the state reporting last year that the retailers had sold more than $1 billion in medical and recreational marijuana over a one-year period. 10% of tax revenues from recreational cannabis sales will support public education funding as prescribed under the bill that Governor Sisolak previously signed. There's little question about where the administration stands on cannabis policy, regardless of the reported recalcitrance of the State Board of Pharmacy. Meanwhile, in August, a former Las Vegas police officer who sued after facing termination for testing positive for marijuana scored a significant procedural victory, with district judge denying the department's request for summary judgment and agreeing that state statute protects employees' lawful use of cannabis outside of work. Oh. Interesting. Hey, that's a good one. Is that a federal case? We got to look at that. Yeah, that's outstanding. So that's a good Las Vegas case. So it's just, I mean, first of all, the one thing that I think is taking place here, if I'm not mistaken, is that there's an individual who's, I don't know, it's there's a specific individual who is, see, it still says a risk, Jeff. I don't know, maybe they may run into standing problems also. We'll see.
Well, the point being is that the fundamental argument is that this can't be contraband. It's not contraband. Cops are wanting to treat it as contraband so that they can arrest. They can use it to arrest. Well, what does it require constitutionally to be arrested? What is required is probable cause. And the fact that it's Schedule I by law, contraband, is what they want to justify all these arrests. And they can't. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable search and seizure. You can't arrest without, under these circumstances, for all the reasons we've been hollering about for years, frankly. And so, I mean, I hope we should look into expanding this into other states. It's a straightforward argument. The loophole that they're talking about here is the Board of Pharmacy. That's not a loophole. That's a goddamn agency that's supposed to be in charge of determining whether something is, plutonium or whether it's oregano. Yeah, we could sue them all. Let God sort them out.
Lenity, it's almost like it's. I don't know if that's right. And that hasn't worked with the Controlled Substances Act, but the idea that there's. You're authorizing people to engage in the use of cannabis. You're authorizing them to drive within their car, have it smell if it smells, and then not distinguishing that from it representing for law enforcement to be contraband per se or illicit, which means they have no right to possess it. These two things can't exist in the same world. Same issue came up with medical marijuana. And, and even the argument that it's not illicit anymore, but Schedule II, which it is, right, under the Public Health Code, still did not stop it being illicit for probable cause purposes. But I don't, and the question, I don't know, Jamie, what are your thoughts on the long-term impact of this in Michigan? Do you think it's still a thing? We know of cases where they're still raiding and railing and forfeiting and felonizing still existing. What about you? You got any comments on that? Are you talking? He's not listening. Jim, what do you think? Are they still raiding and robbing and stealing?
No.
No, not as much, or not at all?
I mean, there's always going to be an element of that, I think. I mean, we see it in every highly regulated industry where I think there's some amount of that activity, but it's not like it was. It's definitely not like it was. I mean, where we had people running around trying to get the police to just stop kicking in our doors. That shit, by and large, has stopped.
I would agree. I think, it's become more of a local enforcement issue for caregiving, which is scary because,
Because they really do what they just want.
They do whatever they want, and they don't care. And
the district courts don't care either.
They don't care. And it's not even something that should be something that could get into court because it's supposed to be civil, anyways, that's the first thing that's become local. The other thing is that I think, for all purposes, I think a lot of the prosecutors don't want to deal with this, even though the police may. It's hard. I don't know, and I think there's limited. I don't know if this is necessary, but at least I think there's some there's at least a couple of prosecutors in the state that have declared that they're not interested in prosecuting marijuana cases. Right? There's a couple.
I mean, I think that for the most part, they're shifting their focus to the driving offenses now, and we knew that was what was going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, I agree that they may not be focused on, a possession charge or something of that nature, but certainly if a police officer in the state of Michigan pulls you over and smells marijuana, you can bet your ass you're getting out of the car.
It's funny. I had this. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I heard this call that we've been talking with someone, and there's so much interest in wanting to represent this individual because they had not gotten sentenced yet, but they got convicted at trial, Jim, and got involved and kind of getting a feel for what if you wanted to hire us, what were we going to do and how we're going to address the conviction, because of course he has an automatic right to appeal, which is something we may want to do. But when I began to evaluate what took place at the trial, and not even looking at what happened at trial, but just procedurally, it was amazing to me because he was it's 24, 25 years old. He's a medical marijuana patient, and he was arrested and charged with any presence of a controlled substance, any presence. Now, I think there's a consensus amongst most lawyers, prosecutors, that if you're over the age of 21, you can no longer be charged with the crime of any presence of a controlled substance, to wit, marijuana.
But that hasn't been vetted out in court yet.
I would say that it has, by way of the Madison Perry case.
Okay, tell me about that.
Madison Perry was a case that found that this under 21-year-old girl who was found to have cannabis in her system could be charged with and convicted of having any presence in her system. Now, there's a fact in that case which suggested there was somebody smoking marijuana while they were actually driving, okay, which may have been like a Section 7 akin to the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. Like, that's not allowed, and if you do that, all bets are off kind of thing. Like, if you're you can't be intoxicated or impaired by the substance, using heavy equipment, that kind of stuff, whatever it was. What was another one that was an exclusion? I don't remember. Anyway, so
Michael, is it linked to the fact that it's Schedule 1? Is any presence linked to it being Schedule 1?
Yes, it is. It has to be a schedule. It says any presence of a controlled substance, Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Jeff, you know the answer to it because we learned this in the case that we were working on. But my point is that if you're under the age of 21, this court, the Court of Appeals in Michigan, said that a person under 21 can be charged with any presence. Why? Because And it's interesting because there are protections for people under the age of 21 for possession, transfer, driving in the car with it, but they couldn't go as far as to say the ingestion of it and the driving of it is something that's permitted. It starts out.
I could see that interpretation.
So what they didn't argue is that it can't be considered Schedule 1
But that has not,
anymore.
Which has not been we do not have our people versus Kuhn here. We just don't.
Yes, we do. Well, no. For adults, of course we do. So then that case identifies specifically that she's under 21 and that this law states this law is intended to protect the arrest, whatever. So they only address underage 21. It's presumed that that's been eliminated. Now, a person can't be, quote unquote, under the influence of marijuana while they're driving.
Correct.
Okay. Now, so what I'm saying to you is they charged him with any presence because he's a medical marijuana patient, and the Supreme Court, People versus Kuhn, said that
you can't do that.
Can't do that, right? So then, of course, the lab report, and this is a bone of contention, does not report the uncertainty measurement. You may have heard me rant and go crazy about this, but the lawyer, and, the lawyer, the young lawyer at the time, didn't know to look for it, didn't know to ask for it, didn't know if you ask for it, they'll give you a letter that says this is why we don't use an uncertainty measurement. And that thing, getting that letter and knowing that they don't have an uncertainty measurement gives you a lot of fodder, so to speak, to attack the state's case, especially for in any presence. But that's not even something that they could be charged with, convicted of, or otherwise. And I'm just saying this because you would think that, I was shocked that this could take place in a courtroom anywhere. I guess.
I'm not.
Do you understand? Like, it shouldn't be. First of all, my point would be this, and you can talk. It shouldn't be such that if you don't have the right lawyer, or you got a young lawyer, or you get something like this, you get convicted of a charge that could never be brought. The prosecutors committing that are either so neglectful. It's actually like a Jeff. It's a malicious prosecution, right? Because they could never prove that count. According to Kuhn.
The jury found this guy not guilty on the...
Oh, yeah. So listen, I got to finish the story. So he was originally charged with any presence. Yep. Day one, it's arraigned. The day of trial, they add 2 counts and don't arraign him. That's a whole other story. Again, I'm hearing all this and saw it on the Register of Actions. And they had 2 counts, that being operating under the influence of marijuana and operating while visibly impaired is a lesser offense. So they got 3 choices, the jury. They find him not, and they ultimately find him not guilty of any presence, which makes no sense at all. They find him guilty of operating while under the influence of marijuana, and they find him not guilty of operating while visibly impaired, which they would have to do because it's one or the other.
Well, why did they feel that he was operating while under the influence? What evidence was presented to the jury?
I don't know exactly, but I'm going to surmise from the police report that they presented things that are not evidence, like such as the lab report, which is not indicative of whether that number. And they had I could go on for
the chicken dance. Obviously,
he did all the chicken dances,
the chicken dance.
And nobody knew to ask the questions of. Is there any place that you could point out, officer, where the horizontal gaze and nystagmus test, that there's a scientific article that suggests that lack of smooth pursuit of the eye equates to cannabis intoxication? No. What about the one-leg stand? No. What about the walk and turn? No. What about convergence? No. Then how can you say that each of these things that my client, you said passed some, failed others, equate to probable cause to arrest? Ready for this? This is the answer. The totality of the circumstances.
That's always the answer.
So you got the totality of nothing, and the totality of nothing, and the totality of nothing.
The totality of the evidence combined with my years of experience and training are indicative that this person was fucked up.
Well, that's some of the fun story here. All right, so, Jeff, what do you say to that? How can that be?
Yeah, I think what you have is an inconsistent verdict, and it's hard to bust an inconsistent verdict, but it's not impossible. Because on the one hand, you have not guilty of any presence. In other words, there's no presence. And on the other hand, you have a guilty for driving under the influence, which presumably you would have to have some type of a drug present to be under the influence of it. It's a classic inconsistent verdict.
But here's the thing: the first verdict of not guilty should never have been a choice for the jury. Period. And it was error to enter that. Second of all, the evidence that was turned over to the defense per Discovery and Brady didn't include the uncertainty measure, which is 29%. Just explaining that gives the lawyer some play, something about the meaningfulness of the value that's reported. On the lab report, they also reported, what do you know, carboxy THC. That number's inflated, has no meaning. It isn't even a controlled substance. Yet there it finds itself on the report. It's either shenanigans in the legal sense, it's hiding the ball, Brady violations in the classic sense, it's potentially ineffective assistance. And I think that prosecuting someone when you knowingly cannot prevail according to state law is malicious. And it should never have been a charge that was put before the jury. Furthermore, I'm involved with an amicus brief right now, the organization Michigan Association of OWI Lawyers. We did an amicus brief challenging the Dauber issue of DRE, don't call it an expert, drug recognition evaluators. We actually got the issue before the Court of Appeals. A slew of lawyers collaborated, good group of guys. And we've submitted one on behalf of this organization. Komorn Law participated. We actually handled the, I think it's stage, like the 7th of the 10 DRE evaluations, which include muscle tone, because it's important that the officer get a real good feel of your muscles when you're in the jail after you've been arrested, and he or she is going to be able to tell you what kind of drugs you're on by touching your muscle tone.
That effect.
Rigid or loose.
That's awful.
Rigid or loose are some of the
Rigid
terms
or loose
that are used.
What if it's rigid?
Hard.
What does that mean?
It means that.
Does that mean you're going to jail? Oh, you're already in jail. Never mind.
It means you're about to be manhandled.
Well, it's interesting because the DRE is done by a so-called, what do you want to, whatever you want
expert?
Not, but yeah, something like that.
Later.
And they are, and they do it after the arrest, right? So you already have the arresting officer going through what you have. They don't do the DRE at the side of the road. Now you have
So they wait to get to the jail to feel you up.
which is after they've been arrested and they've already, and most of the time they've already ascertained whether or not the person takes any drugs or admitted to some drugs.
Right.
They also, what's interesting is the drug recognition evaluator is supposed to keep a running log of their accuracy and prediction, because at the end of it, when they do the report, they predict what it's supposed to be. And they're supposed to be...
So it's like their scorecard.
Their scorecard.
Another non-science method helps to justify their non-science method, and then it supports each other.
I was right 100% of the time.
It's important also that the scientific community that one speaks of when we talk about the backing of and the validating of and the passing of the scientific method is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the IACP, which is well understood and respected in the scientific community for its contributions to truth and science. I mean, that's where it came from. And they got some schnitza stuff in here. I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's really funny, but let's you want to hear some more funny stuff? Let's see.
I don't know if it was caught when I was outside when I spun the camera around a little bit, but that was Nick Agro hanging around outside here.
Do you need some help? It sounded like you're panicking. No, okay. We didn't see. I did try to go to you, but I think the mic was off, and I was trying to get your attention. We don't have to talk about this much, but some of the vital signs and second pulse is something we're going to be looking for. There's a dark room examination. If you're in the police custody and they take you into a dark room and you start freaking out and your vital signs and second pulse start to act up because you have no idea what's going on, just remember you're in the middle of a drug recognition evaluation.
Oh.
And while they're in there, they're gonna while you're in this dark room that you have no idea where you're going, your vital signs may be off. And they said, "No, calm down. We're looking for your second pulse, and we're now going to start.
Quit resisting.
We're going to examine your muscle tone, okay?
Grabbing for my gun.
But you're in a dark room. You're like you have no idea. You got and they'll examine skeletal muscle tone. Certain categories for drugs cause muscles to become rigid. Other categories may cause the muscle to become very loose or flaccid. Flaccid. This is like an invitation to check your flaccidity.
Oh boy.
Okay, I mean, in a dark room.
If you're flaccid, you're going to prison.
Flaccidity. And they may even check that flaccidity in conjunction with injection marks.
Oh boy.
Now, I would agree that if that whole situation excited somebody that much, there is probably a psychological problem.
But I don't think it's really directing them to examine flaccid or
flaccidity.
Right. It's more of the muscles.
Yeah.
It's like that have skeletal bone that it's attached
that's
to.
how they get started. That's
right.
Trojan horse.
Depends what you call a muscle, doesn't it?
Well, I would say I was qualified that it's attached to an actual skeletal bone, like a bone of not whatever cartilage or. Right. You should also expect to have a preliminary examination done where the police officer will determine if probable cause has been established. No, it's funny. They do a preliminary examination.
A preliminary.
They do, and they call it a preliminary exam, which they do their eye exam, of course, HGN and VGN, and the divided attention physical test also, where they modified Romberg walk and turn, the one leg stand. They do some of that play around stuff out on the road. That's what we talk about, the walk, talk, and spit. But that's
where they check for bulges.
All right, so we've exhausted this. I think I don't know. It's rather silly, but
we got to take a break anyway.
No one's stopping them. But if you have a case called Komorn Law, we can stop them. We're looking for someone that wants to take. We do, and it could be any case. It could be any case because I promise you they're holding back a lot, and we've carved out and figured out where their holes are, and they cannot be plugged. I don't even think they can honestly proceed with cases under the last depth of cross-examination, the answers that were given. I think that they have a legal duty. I'm not going to say what it is, say what the answers were, but the identifying of this problem would suggest that they cannot knowingly, honestly proceed in good faith without it being malicious in prosecution, both from the prosecutors and the lab and the police.
They're saying somebody stop us.
Right. We are soliciting cases now. Just kidding. We can't do that. But if someone's listening, they've got a cannabis and driving case that they've been charged with, and they want to champion the cause of fighting back and trying to end this injustice once and for all. Call Komorn Law, 248-357-2550. And
there's a new show called Chad Watch. New podcast.
Chad Watch, okay.
Chad Watch with host Chris Silva.
Okay.
If you remember Chris, he worked with us pretty heavily on the legalization effort. The first time around, he managed the campaign. He used to be the head of the state's Green Party. He now works with, he's worked with a couple businesses, in the new industry. He now works with Ryan at Redemption, Ryan Basort at Redemption. But he started Chad Watch along with Kyle Miller, who has Easton Crafts. in Ingham, or I'm not sure what county it's in, but they just recently did March Chadness, and fashioned like a tournament style, vote thing with some players in the industry they didn't like, and they're going to go over and talk about a lot of those, and they're going to touch on Viridis pretty soon. And I suggested to them that you be a part of that show, and I think they're interested in that if that works out for you.
Yeah, I would like to. That's I saw you mention that in our passing today, but yeah, we should. It's a good call, and I remember Chris, of course. And so they're just mocking the entirety of the industry and things that they find to be repugnant and appalling.
Viridis, a lot of them. Skymint.
Well, maybe
Skymint won, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, let's talk about that. Do you have any? I mean, so we're going to come back and talk about. That's one of the topics on our.
We got to take a break.
Agenda. We're going to take a break, but the agenda topic is that the regulators had blocked sales of product worth millions, but I think they released it. We can get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
It was a Skymint, I think, right? All right, you're listening to Planet Green Trees episode.
Skylab.
Number 559, ammo cans. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
When you're charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective. Take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Good to see you, Mr. Mike. How's it going? We're here live on your Planet Green Trees, streaming live on the channel right now. We thought we'd get a couple words and see how you're doing.
Doing pretty good. I was a little panicked getting here because the traffic was terrible. A lot of jams, the football game going on as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got here and I saw that it hadn't started yet, and I thought they were waiting for me.
Of course.
But it turns out they just have a power outage.
No green carpet. Power outage.
And, I was disappointed. I thought that Jamie had made it so that he was waiting for me, actually. But turns out I was wrong. But it looks like a great event. And
real good turnout.
Of freedom out there. See the freedom out there?
Look at that.
Bunch of freedom. Little cannajam sign over there. October 8th. Cannajam.
Coming this fall. Everybody save that date.
Headliners over there. Headliner over there. Lathe.
All these beautiful humans here.
Someone's going to have to help me who it is, but the last World Series the Tigers went to?
84?
That's me. I'm like an 84 guy.
Okay.
They went later.
Oh, yes. 06 maybe, 04 or 06.
Right. And their leading, their top pitcher's name was...
Man.
So it was 104 miles per hour, I guess. He's over there.
Really?
He's over there. The hat. What's his name?
Zumaya?
Yes. Zumaya.
Okay. Awesome.
104 mile per hour. You know what he's doing now? He's coaching Little League. That's what we have in common. I'm a Little League coach, too.
All right, all right.
I hope he talks about how to intermingle cannabis into Little League coaching. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Bringing in the CBD for health purposes, obviously.
I'm thinking more like to doctor the ball a little bit. You know, get a little.
Yeah, get a little resin. Little resin in there.
Spin rate. It's all about spin rate.
It's all about that. You got to get the ratio. You want the drop on the curve or the change up. What about this guy Mike here?
Michael Tui's got one of the most famous cases in the history of the state of Michigan.
Komorn had the honor to be able to represent for us.
I was honored. And it went like judges are control freaks, generally speaking. They like to control people. They put them on probation. They tell them you can't use your medical marijuana card.
Right.
The Michael Tui case said that's bullshit.
Okay.
And when you have your card, the court cannot hurt you if you use medical marijuana while you're on probation. So the response when the judge says you're ordered not to use medical marijuana while you're on probation, you give them the finger and hold your card up.
That's right.
And that's what the case represents. Despite that, we're still fighting legislation to try to undo it. It's that bad. There's actually legislation that's been introduced as like the Michael Tui legislation to undo that shit.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know how it got there?
Clement was just telling me that he had a table full of prosecutors, like specifically saying, you know, my case and Michael Tui, the court case, and that we really pissed off a lot of people with that one, Michael.
So much so that they had to come out of pocket. They didn't have money to pay for the budget of their courthouse, but they came out of pocket to get their lobbyists, because every court needs a lobbyist, right?
Yeah.
They're not just there to interpret the law. They want to make law, go to the legislature, and introduce bills that are intended to fuck people.
That's right.
It's pretty disturbing, but that's the state we're in. What can you do?
It's amazing, humans. That guy's out here making big moves, fighting for everybody out there.
Michael Komorn changed my life.
That's what he says. Believe that. Changing lives out here, fighting for every human.
I own the Center for Compassion and Great Lakes Hemp Supplements in Traverse City. You know, we started back in June of 2009. So I came home and I was on parole in 2008 when we passed this law. So getting this accomplishment of pass for those that are on bond and on probation and on parole has been a goal that I've been working on since I came home from prison in 2008.
That's amazing.
So to get this case to finally go through and set precedents and set so much precedents that they had to respond with legislative change to try to overrule what was a unanimous decision in our Court of Appeals. They need to leave it alone. They need to back off. So you need to call your representatives and tell them to vote no on House Bill 5512. It's really important that we don't let them reverse the change that we fought so hard for all these years.
That's right, man, because the wrong people are in charge on that end. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, man.
Future state rep.
charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
All right. Welcome back to Planet Green Trees, episode number 559.
Ammo cans.
Ammo cans is what we're calling it. The next topic on the agenda here is that once again there's this Jamie. We can look at this and see what this is. But okay, so we're going to talk the Michigan block sale of marijuana products worth millions without an explanation. I think there's a follow-up.
There are a couple rumors. State's not saying anything. I don't know. Has anybody here heard anything about it?
I've just heard probably the same rumors you have, Jamie, and I've got no proof for any of them.
Let's see what's being said, if we can make anything out of this. And then there may have been some action since then. Troy,
was this an administrative search? Were they doing this as part of a?
It's an investigation, and there's a hold on product, and the state's not saying anything. But what we know is that it's coming from Sky Lab, which is the processor. It may be coming from a single cultivator. That hasn't been totally established yet, but some people have suspected that. And it seems to be mainly the branded products of MKX.
Is it a health concern or a?
No, just a hold. They didn't recall it, which some people are speculating that if it was a health concern, they would have recalled it, but it's just on hold.
So that
needed to be done in the context of a what was this, Michael? Remember, it's a procedural due process thing. That any administrative inspection has to be done in accordance with a reasonable inspection program. They can't just investigate Controlled Substance Act violations on a whim. They have to follow an administrative process, not a police process.
Right, but the administrative process is what's being done here. The outcome and the orders here of freezing are part of their enforcement. So here you go. So essentially,
were they given notice in a hearing?
They may have been given. I know how they're supposed to do it, and I've seen when they do it. If it's serious enough, they have the right to suspend activity pending if they can make out a. All right, but I mean, that's what they do. I'm not arguing that they. All right, go ahead, Jeff.
Notice in it.
I understand due process.
Notice in a hearing. Procedural.
So here's the news story that we're just talking about here. The general manager of Freddy's joint a marijuana shop in Clio arrived at work to learn that the THC-infused blue raspberry gummies his store bought the day prior were placed on hold by the state licensing agency.
Not the blue raspberry gummies.
By noon, other flavors were added to the list. The gummies came from a licensed marijuana processor named Sky Labs in Mount Morris, a company that specializes in making edibles. As he was speaking to an MLive reporter, he noticed that additional vaping products sold under a brand sometimes produced by Sky Labs had also been placed on hold by Cannabis Regulatory Agency, formerly MRA. This is not something that we would even be able to comment on, the CRA spokesman David Harn said when contacted. We can't acknowledge or confirm an investigation underway. I can't discuss this topic with you, he's quoted. Attorney Denise Policello, who represents Sky Labs, said the hold was placed on all the business products worth in excess of $5 million without explanation, about 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., they received a call from the client, and literally all their products started going on administrative hold. She said, the CRA said it's related to an investigation. It does not appear to be a public health or safety matter, but I'm speculating because they didn't issue a recall. When CRA places a product on hold, it theoretically prohibits transfer and sales. However, the Bouquet, who's the person speaking on behalf of the company, said the point-of-sale system doesn't automatically flag sales of marijuana that is on hold in the statewide monitoring system. His employees perform daily checks on the inventory to determine if they're safe and clear for sale. He says, Policello says, the lawyer, that the products were placed on a hold at Sky Labs. All seem to originate from the same licensed marijuana grower and includes products that passed testing and have been shipped to retailers across Michigan. Due to attorney-client privilege, she couldn't release the facility's name. That'd be weird if she's representing both Skylab and the other one. That would seem to be, at the end, it'd be attorney-client privilege, or maybe
But
something
There's
else.
also,
We don't
based
know
on some of
that.
the rumors, there's a good reason why she may want to establish that it all was from within the chain.
So, I know you're speculating and you have no evidence of it, and we proclaimed that, but if there's a rumor, then you can speculate without asserting there's being a truth, but just something you've heard. Go ahead.
I have heard that, okay, on one hand, and the one that I know the least about, I just know that it's out there, and that there's some concern that they actually threw D8 in products and without going through any formal channels to do so. I don't know much more about that one, or where it came from. I don't know where the other one came from either, but I heard it from a lot of different angles. That doesn't prove anything, but the more predominant one seems to be that some distillate that was not necessarily originally created under the metric system was slipped in somehow. And that's what triggered the investigation.
There are a lot of I don't know if it's true, but if we're going to speculate, there's some talk about how there's different things that some of the operators might be doing that are able to circumvent the system to some degree.
The whole Delta 8 thing to do that.
There always is.
Well, that brings us to the next topic here, which is an interesting situation, Jeff. For a little while there, the CRA was considering. Hold on, I do want to finish before we get on about this stuff. I want to know, Jim, can you follow up on this and make sure that we know and understand that the follow up to the story that's been updated regarding the Sky Labs, it's true that it's been released. Can you check that?
Yeah, we'll get right on that.
All right.
Immediately, actually.
Where's Jamie? Jamie,
right here.
Not that Jamie, like the guy that. Joe Rogan's got a guy, Jamie, that does it. I mean, just see if I just want to clarify.
Did you just say not you, the good Jamie?
No, I said Joe Rogan's got a guy that brings everything up on the
computer.
On the Google. He Googles it. You don't believe me? Google it. I just want to confirm. I think I heard that, again, all speculation, rumor here, but from that scenario, I heard that they've ultimately released it for whatever reasons. I don't know.
Release the product back to the market again?
I believe so. The hold was lifted, I was told. But I don't know if that's true. I just heard it and I didn't see it. And I imagine that there's an article that has been written about if it would be true. Maybe. But
I don't see any
okay, maybe
any public indication.
Maybe there's something, maybe in the CRA.
I'm looking at the CRA.
Oh, you are? Okay.
And they haven't said shit.
Since the time that the, whatchamacallit happened, since the hold, you don't see any kind of other...
No, I see lots of articles about Denise and Skylabs and $5 million. And
okay,
it still says here that even 2 days ago that the regulators have not publicly offered any explanation. None. Mm-mm.
Well, the public may or may not be entitled to know, but the company certainly is entitled to a notice and a hearing before something so drastic happens.
Yeah. Well,
now, I don't know if they had that hearing or if there's a transcript of it, but that would tell us what's going on.
States cannot acknowledge or confirm an investigation. So I thought that they did say, I thought that there was an acknowledgement of an investigation, and that's why they couldn't say anything. So.
Right, that's normal.
Well, they don't want to say anything. And
I'm talking about from the company's point of view. They're entitled to notice in a hearing before a drastic measure like this. That's fundamental. That's constitutional. That trumps CRA regs.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this non-adopted CRA regs, which included the not allowing. Let me read the story because I think it's got to be explained the right way. So we got this.
They were going to allow hemp conversions. Now they're not.
Right. So here we got.
What's a hemp conversion?
So it goes like this, Jeff. The regulators on Friday, April 15th, axed a plan that was to allow hemp to be synthetically converted to THC, the high-inducing compound.
CBD, and turn it into other cannabinoids.
Right. So allowing the hemp plants to be converted into oils that produce almost the exact same effect could put those existing producers out of business. So what we're talking about here, Jeff, is they were talking about letting the hemp growers sell their biomass to licensed adult use processors who would then extract the CBD from the plant in volumes and masses. And then they would synthesize it, if you want to call it that, or change the chemical makeup of that CBD to Delta 8 and Delta 10, that being the source. This is being kicked around for a while. It was questioned whether it'd be good for consumers, whether it'd be good for the business, whether it'd be good for the state. Of course, I don't know that they've, all of those things were made.
They can turn that CBD molecule into a bunch of different things, I guess, not just that.
Yeah. Right, because once Delta 8 and Delta 10, there'll be Delta 20 and 8 and 4.
And they not just getting from hemp farmers in Michigan, though, and some of the hemp groups around Michigan didn't like this idea. Some of the hemp farmers didn't like it either because this allows them to buy in bulk from other states that produce it already. So some people are envisioning some of the big money interests, I guess, having a lot of purchases from out of state hemp and then brought to labs to be cheaply made into other products.
That could be a thing. I wonder if they could actually, they could limit it to Michigan grown hemp.
They could do a lot of things.
And the idea
that they weren't going to at the point in which it was going to make it into the rules.
Well, that makes no sense. That makes no sense.
Michael, is the product that they're talking about selling plant-based, or is it synthetic?
No.
It has to be labeled synthetic because the process, it's because they synthetically make it. Well, so part of the rules would have been that it would have been labeled synthetic.
I would say it has to go to the pharmaceutical company.
Well, either way,
sense to do it with the point.
Well, what's going to happen is this. First of all, the Delta 8 and Delta 10, any other deltas, THC molecules that are being created have all been, they're not allowed to be sold right now, period.
Except through the MRA.
Not now. If they will be, it's got to be through the MRA, but they pull them to determine when and if they'll be safe for consumption.
But this is probably the right decision.
So businesses, cultivators who had already, a lot of what they've been through in order to get to the point where they're the ones supplying the flower to the processors in order to make different products. So they immediately were opposed to this, thinking that the cheap, easy competition of a bunch of hemp, whether or not that's true or not, this was the thinking. They band together in some capacities and started working against this. A lot of the hemp groups that didn't like the idea of the out-of-state stuff or, that kind of thing, also started working against this. There was, I know, at least a consumer group that was against this. And even so, we all still expected it to be part of the rules when they went down. This was kind of still a surprise, even though a lot of people said they didn't like it. It was still kind of a surprise that they all of a sudden just excluded it, and then cited the fact that they heard from so many different sources about it. But some of those places really, I guess in hindsight, really put together some organized groups and put some resources behind it, and made it clear they didn't dig it.
I understand that there's different operators that were fighting against it, and the growers, of course, would be doing so because specifically of the concerns for out-of-state hemp farming. Out-of-state hemp farming. I wonder if the local hemp farmers, Michigan farmers, would have been so adverse to it if they would have limited to Michigan hemp farmers, right? You had to have a license and it'd be grown here. That would be something, then at least you're somewhat of a closed market, open for. But it sounds like it was not a Michigan hemp farmer initiative. It sounds like it may have been brought on from other staters that pushed the issue and would have gotten it this far. And but I didn't mind the idea, generally speaking, of some level of access by the hemp farmers to the licensed market. And what I say by that is that it's been a hard go for a lot of the hemp farmers. I think there's a lack of, listen, it's very unregulated, which is fantastic, but it has left itself, because of that, just a strange marketplace. And finding some value for that biomass into a taxable, if you're going to do it for cannabis, and I'm not saying that it has to be done that way, but as a particular choice. If they wanted to go into that road, it created some incentives for farming of hemp, and through that incentive in farming hemp, it's going to naturally, if it's a financially viable play for any company, it's going to generate revenue and let those hemp actors expand and create some Michigan hemp industry of some kind in the state, which I think it exists, but it's not,
Right, that would give it something more solid to hold on to, and then an advantage, at least for a while, maybe have it be for the first few years or something like that, because the interstate stuff's inevitable at some point, I would think. But to get it started
with hemp or with cannabis sativa L that's greater than 0.3%?
Both.
Well, hemp would certainly seem sooner, right?
Yeah,
how could you stop the influx from another state? But I guess
it already can go on now.
Okay, but can it get into the? This is
Who
what.
Who cares if it could?
I'm saying. Listen, if we're doing this tax and
ultimately we shouldn't, because that's where it has to go. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I'm just saying, like you're saying, yes, cannabis comes into the state. It may be, and it's not. It's not supposed to. It may find its way into the regulated market. Are you suggesting that, Jamie? Out-of-state cannabis being sold at retail.
Yeah, at some point. I don't mean through sneaky channels. That would be the accepted practice.
Is it happening now? Is it happening now?
Not well. I don't know. Not that I know of.
Okay.
People do all types of weird shit. So
right.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Anyway, so
maybe that distillate came from out of state that we're talking about in this investigation, or not investigation from the state that resulted in a hold on a product.
The investigation that's not an investigation.
But there's a real hold on a product. Maybe without an investigation.
They cannot confirm nor deny that, Jamie.
It would seem to me this. It seemed to me that the discussion with as restricted as the CRA is in everything, the idea that they would be open to taking out-of-state hemp seems to me to be something that could have only been created by an out-of-state hemp company, right, Jamie? And they were the one lobbying, and they're the ones that had enough money to lobby.
Or the big money interests here that were really thinking about taking advantage of it and bringing in a lot of it for cheap, and then very cheaply making.
Isn't that what's best for the consumer?
It might be best for the consumer, but I do think we have a right to be nationalistic and tribal about our state's economy.
Especially just and really at the point in which it's an emerging industry and we're trying to shape some things, and to just allow that advantage right off the bat, while that is a good case for a seasoned competitive market and all that kind of stuff, I agree with trying to limit it and advantage, getting things started here with a.
Well, I agree with the decision, but it's not for those reasons. I think,
first of all, It seems ridiculous. I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I mean, I think it, and I realize, I believe this is the reason they cited, and I believe it probably wasn't their true motive, but the fact of the matter is, and let me preface it with this, that when Delta 8 and Delta 10 were being sold in smoke shops and gas stations and all of that, I was the one that was saying, who gives a shit? Let them continue to do it. You don't need to regulate it. Leave it the fuck alone. But here in the regulated market, if we're really talking about, consumer safety, I do think that there's still due diligence that needs to occur with some of these, synthetic or synthesized cannabinoids. We don't know a whole lot about these molecules and how they impact the human body.
Just incidentally, Jim, that's another thing. There were a couple different sources, scientific sources. I mean, how deeply researched and confirmed, I don't know, but said that during conducting some testing of the synthesized products, that there were a couple of unusual spikes that demonstrated some concern in what was actually made during that process, and there could be some things there that we don't want. And,
well, they bathe it in acid, among other things. I mean, it's a synthesizing process. They're taking the plant and synthesizing molecules from it.
Right, and I mean, to me, it seems
it needs to be in a bare minimum, a certified facility, but that's more the drug industry than it is the marijuana.
Exactly. And that's why the whole thing to me, it's just dripping in irony, because the entire reason people gravitated towards Delta 8 and Delta 10 is because Delta 9 is fucking illegal, or else they would get a joint of marijuana, cannabis, and they would smoke that. So the fact that we're trying to converge the two, to me, is it's comical almost.
So what happened?
Well, it's counterproductive.
Yeah.
In a way, so that I guess some people know, is that there are some ideals there, and I think they're in between what we're talking about. I guess to say just go ahead and it's just cannabis and make the shit and put it out. That's one way of looking at it. Maybe ultimately that's the best way. But I guess when it comes to like mass sales, commercial sales, stuff in the gas stations and stuff like that, a consumer should have at least some base confidence that some vetting process took place to make sure you're not buying something that has some contaminants in it or something like that, in my opinion. And I think in an ideal sense, maybe the Department of Ag held on to it and they put in a really basic regulatory scheme, so that it wasn't very restrictive, but at least had that very fundamental consumer protection involved in it, and allowed it to be sold at places where, people could sell it and set up selling it. But that was never going to happen. It was either going to be it completely gets prohibited or it gets housed under the existing system.
Right. And now it's completely prohibited.
And it was up against some issues anyway, because it had to, just like the diamonds at one point, or in the other things that, just to get started with, they had to establish the entire process and get it approved and all that kind of stuff. They still had to do that.
Which, I mean, that part's fair, and that's what I think we want the regulated system to do. It's certainly my expectation. That being said, like I said, I mean, I very much wish the agency would have never gotten involved, but it is what it is, and this is their job, and I don't believe they've had time to do due diligence on these substances yet.
I agree.
Well, we don't know, and one of the issues that we're talking about, the Delta 8 to Delta 10, because it's processed, we don't know what the chemicals that are being used, what the remnants are that are left over, and what the impact it may be on the human system, because it has a synthesizing impact through chemical manipulation of some kind, or some.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I'm not sure if I have it readily available, but I've got these, reports that were sent to me from somebody in Ohio discussing these spikes and stuff like that. Heard Ryan Basor independently discuss some other kind of similar concern from some other source in Michigan.
What kind of spikes? What does that mean?
I mean, just something in the testing that says there are these things present that might be of concern. I mean, I don't want to try to explain it any more than that because I'm certainly not capable of it.
You're probably talking about the GCMS, and when you see spikes, it's indicative of a specific compound that's present in the test sample. And you know, in some places you expect a spike, and some you don't. And if you see, you know, the ones that you don't expect, a lot of times those could be contaminants when you're talking about a conversion process like this. Not to say
I could try to pull up the information and see if I can get more specific about it. But that was brought up a couple times, of course, during this thing. You know. So, but ultimately, Jim, I agree that for there to be a really inexpensive yet usable product for people, I mean, there's a large part of the market that likes that concept, and you know, isn't as tuned in or as concerned.
Yeah, but
a lot of the other details.
Cannabis will get there, though. It's not going to be that much longer. I mean, we've already seen a drastic drop in the price in Michigan, and as the industry continues to mature, and hopefully the state loosens their grip and tries to make it a little cheaper for operators to operate, and the IRS hopefully butts out, then we'll see prices really begin to.
280E thing would be pretty cool.
Hell yeah, it would, and that would be a dramatic win for consumers
and for businesses.
For sure, but I'm sure they would pass that on. They would have to in order to remain competitive. So everybody would win, I think.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, ultimately, if it works out like it kind of has in other places, there could be you know, more consistent, higher quality at lower prices, you know, or that balance exists where everybody can operate okay. So see if it turns out ideally like that, but you know, they'll probably have to go through a lot of other stuff to get there, and there'll probably have to be some. I mean, there's already issues going on now with some of the drops in prices from a wholesale perspective. So.
Contraband.
So it's all right. So we figured that out, didn't we? Okay.
We did so.
Well, I mean, there's another conspiratorial discussion on top of this. Rick kind of laid out the components for it. You know,
let's hear it.
Well, you know, I might not explain it as Rick does. I'm taking the pieces and making it, you know, what I.
That's a conspiracy theory, Jamie. Go with it. Run with it. Pieces. Come on.
He's getting at. Yeah, I kind of want a disclaimer of that. You know, he might describe it a little bit differently, but he laid out the pieces for me to say this, and I, of course, incorporate my own experience close to these people and systems that I've seen in action, and really, and it was no more direct than at the end of last session, when Andrew Brisboe and Steve Linder and the Speaker of the House were all working together to try to create, and there may have even been the Attorney General's office chiming in there, trying to create legislation that would combine the licenses, and it was unusual for somebody in the State Department to you know, be pushing legislation, and kind of understood why, you know, why these big money interests wanted to try to advantage themselves in such a way. But it was because the department, you know, the bureaucratic department wants to streamline things and make things as efficient as possible, and, you know, and house as much together, you know, as they can. And it didn't seem like until the big money interests decided to push back on some of the potential rules and make a big issue out of it, you know, specifically concerning like the new small business license, that this stuff was really ever considered, you know, like the opposition was really moving it out on its own by making a good case and that kind of stuff. So it may have been in part due to a broken relationship between the department and the big money interests.
You're saying that they all collaborated. There was like a unification of like politics makes strange bedfellows. Like, right, like the little guy, Linder, that kind of thing, that the hemp people in Michigan,
Big money interests want more control, and the department wants more of a streamlined process. So they came together at certain points to try to, affect legislature, the legislature to make these changes.
Streamline that process. I heard a rumor Steve Linder might be not with the MCMA anymore.
And it seems, that's what I say, it seems credible. I first heard it from George Brico. I then asked a couple of people who also said it was true. But that's that in and of itself, the credible sources said this, but that in and of itself doesn't prove it. So
I'm just saying it's a rumor. That's all.
It is, but it does kind of seem to be true. That's all. I'm not going to check it in until I have better confirmation. But the couple of sources that told me about it, something's there.
Yeah, we'll see.
Unless it was like, 420 is kind of like the new April Fool's.
It could be. It could be. I heard Bill Schuette was going to take over. So.
Yeah, but the good news is he's totally figured everything out. And he's on our side now, and it's pretty cool.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Why don't we take a break? Isn't that something?
Okay, we can take a break and get some other stuff to talk about when we come back. And you're listening to Planet Green Trees, 5:59. Ammo cans. We'll be right back.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
When you're charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Good to see you, Mr. Mike. How's it going? We're here live on your Planet Green Trees, streaming live on the channel right now. We thought we'd get a couple words and see how you're doing.
Doing pretty good. I was a little panicked getting here because the traffic was terrible. A lot of jam, the football game going on as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got here and I saw that it hadn't started yet, and I thought that they were waiting for me.
Of course.
Of course. But it turns out they just have a power outage.
No green carpet. Power outage.
And, I was disappointed. I thought that Jamie had made it so that he was waiting for me, actually. But turns out I was wrong. But it looks like a great event. And
real good turnout.
Freedom out there. See the freedom out there?
Look at that.
Look at the freedom. Little cannajam sign over there. October 8th. Cannajam.
Coming this fall. Everybody save that date.
Headliners over there. Headliner over there. Lathe.
All these beautiful humans here.
Someone's going to have to help me who it is, but the last World Series the Tigers went to?
84?
That's me. I'm like an 84 guy.
Okay.
They went later.
Oh, yes. 06 maybe, 04 or 06.
Right. And their leading, their top pitcher's name was...
Man.
Throws 104 miles per hour, I guess. He's over there.
Really?
He's over there. The hat. What's his name?
Zumaya?
Yes. Zumaya.
Okay. Awesome.
104 mile per hour. You know what he's doing now? He's coaching Little League. That's what we have in common. I'm a Little League coach, too.
All right, all right.
I hope he talks about how to intermingle cannabis into Little League coaching. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Bringing in the CBD for health purposes, obviously.
I'm thinking more like to doctor the ball a little bit, get a little
get a little resin. Little resin in there.
Spin rate. It's all about spin rate.
It's all about that. You got to get the ratio. You want the drop on the curve or the change up. What about this guy Mike here?
Michael Tui's got one of the most famous cases in the history of the state of Michigan.
Komorn had the honor to be able to represent for us.
I was honored. And it went like judges are control freaks, generally speaking. They like to control people. They put them on probation. They tell them you can't use your medical marijuana card.
Right.
The Michael Tui case said that's bullshit.
Okay.
And when you have your card, the court cannot hurt you if you use medical marijuana while you're on probation. So the response when the judge says you're ordered not to use medical marijuana while you're on probation, you give them the finger and hold your card up.
That's right.
And that's what the case represents. Despite that, we're still fighting legislation to try to undo it. It's that bad. There's actually legislation that's been introduced that's like the Michael Tui legislation to undo that shit.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know how it got there?
Clement was just telling me that he had a table full of prosecutors, like specifically saying, my case and Michael Tui, the court case, and that we really pissed off a lot of people with that one, Michael.
So much so that they had to come out of pocket. They didn't have money to pay for the budget of their courthouse, but they came out of pocket to get their lobbyists. Because every court needs a lobbyist, right? They're not just there to interpret the law. They want to make law, go to the legislature, and introduce bills that are intended to fuck people.
That's right.
It's pretty disturbing, but that's the state we're in. What can you do?
It's amazing, humans. That guy's out here making big moves, fighting for everybody out there.
Michael Komorn changed my life.
That's what he says. Believe that. Changing lives out here, fighting for every human.
I own the Center for Compassion and Great Lakes Hemp Supplements in Traverse City. We started back in June of 2009. So I came home and I was on parole in 2008 when we passed this law. So getting this accomplishment of pass for those that are on bond and on probation and on parole has been a goal that I've been working on since I came home from prison in 2008.
That's amazing.
So to get this case to finally go through and set precedents and set so much precedents that they had to respond with legislative change to try to overrule what was a unanimous decision in our Court of Appeals. They need to leave it alone. They need to back off. So you need to call your representatives and tell them to vote no on House Bill 5512. It's really important that we don't let them reverse the change that we fought so hard for all these years.
That's right, man, because the wrong people are in charge on that end. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, man.
charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
All right, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. Episode 559. We got a couple other topics we're going to talk about. Maybe call it early. I do want to just bring this up because it's been laying on my desk. I thought it was interesting. There's a number of words in history that have been named after people. Does anybody know what they are? Words that have been developed and decided, and they are actually named after other people.
Like when you call the toilet the John?
Crap.
Nope, not that at all. Like, I would say the John Hancock. Shorthand for your signature, right? That's become a word that represents John Hancock. On display as a short and elaborate flourish on the Declaration of Independence. He's got the magical John Hancock. Anyone care to venture at some other words that are like this? Okay, how about this one? Saxophone. Saxophone. Named after Adolphe Sax, a Belgian instrument maker back in the mid-1800s. The phone suffix comes from the Greek word for sound, although calling it a plain old sax is equally correct. Sideburns. Anybody sideburns?
Yeah.
Ambrose Burnside. Burnside was a Union Army general, railroad executive, and the first president of the NRA. Google it. Yeah. Google it. See his photo, and you'll see why this distinctive look was named after him. Sideburns. Jeff Frazier. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
How about any other NRA listeners, members who...
Yeah.
It's not one of the conditions to be part of the group, I don't think, that you have sideburns. All right, here we go. Cardigan. Cardigan. Earl of Cardigan is 7th Earl of Cardigan, whose troops wore this cozy fashion staple in battle. Let's see. Boycott.
How about Sandwich? The Earl of Sandwich.
It didn't make this list. I'm not disputing it. Let's see. We got... Boycott. This first boycott was an act of rebellion against Charles Boycott. The Irish land baron saw his field workers strike as part of a broader political statement to let laboring farmers own the land they worked. Boycott.
I still think to take a crap should be in there.
Hold on, maybe. Let's see. Nicotine. How about that? Many products brand their names from Cadbury, Cadillac, but nicotine is an ingredient come from a French ambassador named Jean Nicot. He scouted tobacco while visiting Portugal and brought seeds and leaves back with him. Seems a French reputation for smoking has old roots. MacGyver, you ever have the MacGyver? Some people are MacGyverists and stuff,
That's right.
All right.
It's true.
Is that too much of that? All right, here, let me do one more.
One more.
It's on the table. How about this? It was really last week, but we didn't get to it, so it's
we're playing catch-up, really.
Today in history, but 1 week ago, was the first Pony Express in Sacramento, California.
Oh.
April 13th, 1860, the first Pony Express mail was delivered in Sacramento, California after 10 days of travel. The Pony Express was the United States mail delivery service. Despite the general
express, was it?
ubiquity of its name, it was actually extremely short-lived in operation from April 3rd, 1860 to October 26th of 61. The Pony Express delivered mail on horseback through vast swaths of the country from California and Missouri, and with remarkable speed. In fact, the service of the Express shortened delivery time by roughly 10 days.
Wow.
Due to the efficiency of the service, became the standard means of east-west communication through its 18 months operation. One of the service's great contributions to the state of California as it was being newly incorporated into the rest of the United States during this period of time. There's a predecessor for the U.S. Postal Service, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
Does the U.S. Postal Service still get credit for what it does? Let's have a poll real quick.
No.
Liking the Postal Service or not liking it? Jeff Frazier.
U.S. Postal Service, it's constitutional. I like it.
Jamie Lowell.
I haven't had much problem with it, I guess. I don't.
Jimmy Powers?
It's redundant.
Why?
Because private industry already has the logistics issue solved.
Steve, what do you think about the U.S. Postal Service?
About the U.S. Postal Service? I think all in all, they do a pretty damn good job.
Okay.
I mean, I've only had a couple of letters, things lost, really not a lot compared to what you send out. I think they do pretty good.
There's no question that over time and with email and whatnot, it's become much easier to communicate formally and informally with needed. It seems to be less and less. But let's talk about it in its heyday before this. I mean, there was no other real system like it.
No, it had its time and place for sure.
And, in some ways, the question is, could the mail system be exclusively private in nature? Because it could be maybe now because we've got... This,
well, it can't be because the Constitution won't allow for it.
See what?
I'm pretty sure the Constitution...
You used to be able to mail your kids around the country.
I'm just saying, does there need to... would the private system protect the privacy of criminal activity in the mail? Would they be able to do that, monitor that?
They monitor criminal activity through the private logistics companies now.
I'm saying during the heyday of no email and when mail was a thing. I mean, do you think it would have... Do you think there was... Anyways, I'm just saying, I think it's survival to this point. It unequivocally set... I mean, no other country, and feel free to disabuse me, those that have lived in other countries, but from historical perspective, I don't think there was similar kind of communication methods akin to the... I mean, the U.S. Postal Service was not copied off of somebody else. Please disabuse me. Who knows? Look it up, Jamie. Just kidding. Or Jamie, I mean this unknown person that's here.
Other Jamie.
I'll look it up. How do other countries deal with the post? Jeff.
Put it into Google.
Historically speaking, not how they do it now. What do you say?
I don't know. Some of the biggest buildings in Latin American cities that I've been to are the old post office. It's, developed hand in hand with the rail, I suppose. Everywhere.
What's that? Say it again.
I said it probably developed hand in hand with the rail. For
sure.
sending things long distance.
Okay.
I don't know. It's got a deep history everywhere. The idea, people corresponded back in the day. They hand wrote letters and posted them to different parts of the world, the different systems. In one of the remote islands in Galapagos, there's an old barrel. It's a mail barrel. And the ships that came and go would pick up and drop off posts, letters back home. I mean, Charles Darwin sent all of his specimens back via post.
To the U.S. Postal
Service? It's a function of government, which is why it's provided constitutionally in our Constitution.
Right. It's true.
The post office is constitutional.
Right. It must. Therefore, it's budgeted for one. Okay, so we got that.
Yeah.
Jamie wanted to comment on something. What were we talking about, Jamie? Something or other?
Well, there's a group working with some lawmakers to get a bill introduced in the state legislature that would somehow circumvent or prohibit or obstruct the locals from doing these really, prohibitive ordinances. That we've spoken a lot about on this show, like square footage restrictions and
you're talking about for caregivers.
Caregivers of lower pint counts, whatever, just trying to impose.
I think what they could do
the limits of the DeRuiter.
This is what they should think about doing. They should indicate that being a caregiver is not a home occupation. They don't have to do much other than that.
I did bring that up in discussion with these.
But you go right, that would be it, because it's only through DeRuyter, and it's hard for me to even imagine how it got there. There's absolutely no jurisprudence, any case that addresses cannabis caregivers, medical marijuana caregivers, as a home occupation. It's just not.
Maybe the conspiracy.
What's that?
The municipal league and the township association seem to be pushing some places, or trying to promote the ordinances in an attempt to see how much local control they can push out of that vague ruling.
Well, what I'm saying is that if you look at the townships, cities, villages, and the Michigan Municipal League, when they got handed the decision in Teerbeek, which has been 9 years, they were handed a ruling that said cities, townships can't do anything, period. There's no allowing any kind of, you can do whatever you want, but if you try to enforce things that are contrary to the MMA's basic fundamental principles, such as privacy, reporting, like if they forced you to report as a caregiver and identify who you are, this would be directly in conflict with the guaranteed private registry that the state law allows you, right?
Yes.
And no one is supposed to know, and this has been, beaten and battered a little bit. Just the idea of them asking, that would be the first thing. And the limitations on it is something that they can't do either. But anyways, the point I would say is this. And nowhere in any of the jurisprudence was there a case that said because medical marijuana caregivers are home occupations, thus these are the rules or something like that. That was never the case. It was very clearly identified that there are volume limitations that provide, if you're in compliance, you get an immunity from arrest or prosecution or penalty. And if you're outside of those limitations, you're going to assert an affirmative defense. That's it. It doesn't allow for, suggest anything about overages, anything about a business. Yes, you're allowed to receive compensation for costs for the sale, and the sale of marijuana is not considered the sale of a controlled substance. That is not per se a business. In fact, a lot of times the impetus of a probable cause to arrest, raid, or whatever was the idea that somebody was, operating as a home business, making it illegal or something to that effect, or that they were selling more than they were allowed to, or making too much money, for example, like they were profiting. These were nowhere in the laws that say that. Nowhere is there a limitation to how much a caregiver could or could make. But there was never a legal principle that existed that would allow a legitimate, that legitimized caregiving as a business, period. Okay? So I say that because, I don't know if there's 11, 12 cases that were maybe 8 or 9 Supreme Court and 3 or 4 other Court of Appeals that set the entire tone of everything. And you look and see how, in fact, no matter how screwy the case was, that got the case to the Court of Appeals, and they screwed up and the Supreme Court ironed it out. Most of the time, they made a genuine effort to fulfill the language and purpose and intent of the voter initiative. Most of the time, they did it. Some of them, maybe one or two, maybe a little politically. But in no way, shape, or form was the MMMA in any way designed to be considered to be, or even language to be found to consider it to be, a business. No. Okay, now, the DeRuyter case begins the premise that caregiving is a business, a home occupation business, which allows townships to regulate. Now, how that happened is a very strange oddity in legal folklore. Furthermore, why would a person not argue that to whatever the allegations of the necessary interests of a city township to regulate a home occupation, which they have a legitimate right to do, why would a person's immunity from arrest, prosecution, or penalty of any kind not prevent that from happening? And why is that argument not being made? Now, there's like an underlying hidden fact that I think is important. I don't know that it's not in the case. It's not discussed in the case, but clearly this is the period of time when caregivers were allowed to feed the marketplace for the growing licenses that were buying and selling, and ultimately directly to the retailers for a period of time under Rule 19. And this, of course, brought a lot of caregivers into the marketplace for that sole purpose. They locked down some roots, and I think the caregiver market at this point was, some might describe it as caregivers gone wild, but it certainly was an opportunity for
caregivers gone wild.
For individuals who had been caregiving and under scrutiny, under stress, all of a sudden invited to save the state of Michigan from a medical emergency if patients weren't allowed to get their cannabis. And those are the words of the executive order that justified this. So it's got to be only because of that factual development that all of a sudden caregivers were somehow quasi providers into this retail market at homes that made them all of a sudden. But that's not part of the law. That's like some other administrative rule nonsense. It doesn't change. So I'm saying, Jamie, I still am baffled. I know some different cities and townships have created odd and, they're not all the same. Each one's trying to do a little something different. There are some commonalities in some of the restrictions they tried to enforce, but
are they making any distinction between patients that grow for themselves and caregivers who may or may not be patients themselves that grow for others?
Yeah, oftentimes 12 plant thing that sometimes they do try to zone caregivers completely out of a house, but oftentimes if it's
do they ever try to zone patients out of
No, but so patients with their 12 plants, and then sometimes a caregiver up to 12 plants,
But that would be exclusive of the 12 for their adult self that they could grow. They're trying to make a limit of 12 plants in every house, no matter what. Which would be
on what? I mean, that conflict.
I'm saying that's the idea. I think is an overarching theme. I'm saying to you, they can limit that and expect to limit
12
that.
to 24, yeah.
12, but what does that mean? If someone's got 24 in there, how do they know? Number one, it's not probable cause if they do, because it's just a civil infraction. And number three, it shouldn't be defined as a noxious smell that would justify a nuisance, anything or other, because it's legal. I don't think, and I don't know, we've got a little battle on our hands with a condominium association that is completely bizarre. I mean, the other thing is like the complainers of this is not, it's not for the police. I'm sorry, it is for the police to address these issues, especially if cannabis, ready for this, remains Schedule 1. It's not for a city, village, or township to start investigating things that they're trying to describe as illegal. It's not for them to do it. I know this is the way it's going, and I know a lot of them have tried to. I don't know if this is true. I think some of them are trying to have a reasonable approach, even though it seems very restrictive. And I think if they were going to make a claim or issue at any kind, it's it may not even be the caregiving that causes the problem, Jim.
Yep.
Or Steve or Jamie, Jeff. They complain that the installation of the additional air conditioner or the extra, air conditioner in the garage or the power, on that particular amp is going to blow out, and whatever work's been done on the house without pulling a permit.
Yep.
Those are arguably legitimate.
They're valid.
City interests of things that they can require and ask of.
Yep, they sure are.
Now, but to prevent a caregiver from growing his full is full allowed number of plants unless it's in the statute somewhere.
No, they can't do it. But what you're seeing is their end around is the caregiver can't grow 72 plants without having an extra air conditioning unit or two installed outside.
And then upgraded amps on the...
Right.
And upgraded amps. In order to really do those things and make those amendments to their house, they have to...
You have to go through the city and get permits.
No matter what.
But those are reasonable. Like, if you're going to take your service from 100 amp to 200 amp, you probably want the city to come inspect it.
Well, a lot of people don't.
Oh?
I mean, I'm not... Listen, the number of fires that happened from this, we've heard about. There's been a couple. It's not really about that. We had one...
I think it's more about...
Yeah, butane and stuff like that.
Well, does it pull too much from the transformer that's supplying power to that area?
That's a problem. Yeah. I mean, that's where it becomes...
We heard about
burn down.
We heard about a sub that was blown out for, 3 days or something because of a caregiver.
Although...
in Sterling Heights or something.
Although, I would say this. In the same breath, he said, had... each of these 3 or 4 caregivers that were off the same transformer that blew out the subdivision for like 12 or 15 houses, had they been charging their, battery cars at their house, the same thing would have happened, right? And that's, if they had e-cars or Teslas or whatnot.
Yeah.
So
that's not the reason not to have the proper amperage.
Well, it's really a question of, it's funny because it's not, what the guy was saying was that whether, okay, sure, they're going to blow out the amp if they're doing cannabis, and we would complain it's cannabis, blah, 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 they should have done something about it. But if someone came in and installed a home charger for their Tesla and their 2 neighbors did it as well, it's the same impact on their local grid their transformer as 3 grows, and nobody would have said boo about it. Maybe they got to pull a permit to do that, probably, right?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, same thing.
And that would be their point. That would be their point. But really, their major point stepping back was that the infrastructure from our DTE is so antiquated. And
a lot of it is, but...
It's totally antiquated all over the state. Like, I don't know, they have no concept of, bringing things like that, like their 1970 infrastructure.
Yeah, if they allowed to grow in Texas, it'd crash the grid, man. We'd be without electricity for months.
I mean, I don't know, I just think...
it seems reasonable to, prevent fires.
I think that the government is going to bail out the DTE when electric cars get to the point where, as predicted in 2023, 25, that there'll be 25% of the market. And when electric cars are 25% of the market, and there's a need for substations and home chargers and grids that are failing all over the place, you're going to see government investment in those infrastructures, either to businesses or entities or maybe tax write-offs of some kind.
See, maybe they can finally bury the wires here in Michigan. Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, don't we all? I mean, it's something we don't talk about, and of course we are into flaming conspiracy theories tonight, but. And I don't know. Let's say this just totally that we're vulnerable on our grid, and the consequences of that are not good.
That is an accurate statement. I mean, we
how
see,
vulnerable?
Well, I mean,
Google it.
Look, I don't need to Google it. We all experienced it. I mean, let's all remember back to 2003, when the grid completely shit itself in the Midwest, and we were all without power. That was caused by a tree. A single tree hitting a transmission line. And the fact that sort of domino effect can occur is not good. And I got news for you. There has not been significant improvement since then. So the grid, to your point, Michael, is very much in the same state that it has been for a very long time.
There's been some other total grid blackouts, either East Coast at times because of hurricanes, certainly the hurricanes. And
but ours was a tree. A tree.
Ours, we came 5 minutes away in Texas for crashing our entire electric